The White House in full damage control mode, that after yet another controversy involving the Russians. Actually, two of them today. First one involving President Trump providing them with classified information. We're going to make you part of the show here by opening up our phone lines so that you can weigh in. Then, are top Republicans complicit in what's going on in our country? At what point? There was a bombshell that came down in the last hour we'll fill you in on. What point will it trigger them to stand up and say no more as it relates to the commander-in-chief, even if it could be politically dangerous? Also, the problems with Penn Station and New Jersey Transit keep getting worse. I don't have to tell you commuters that. We're going to talk to a gubernatorial hopeful in the Garden State, Ray Lesniak, about that and why he thinks he's the best person to succeed Chris Christie. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and I've been able to say this for well over 100 days now. Never a dull day in Washington. It has gotten so bad that influential Republican Senator Bob Corker, who was once thought of to be the Secretary of State choice for this president, says the White House is in a downward spiral, his words, and he also said chaos. We are going to open up the phone lines so that you can weigh in on that, as well as the Trump presidency in general, to where we are right now. The number, you can see it there at the bottom of your screen. It's a toll-free number. We're opening up our phone lines as we speak. 888-766-2428. If the phone line's filled up, I'm going to try and get to as many as I can. Keep on calling. Now, as if we needed even more controversy, the New York Times reporting in the last hour here that James Comey took notes during that infamous dinner with the president. And more than what we've already learned, a new bombshell. Comey's memo says the president asked him to end the Flynn investigation. White House, of course, denying that as well. Meantime, the White House, they're still trying to explain what happened with President Trump's meeting with the Russians. And as usual, the president himself is making things even more complicated by contradicting people in his own administration. President Trump,
did you reveal classified information to the Russians, sir?
Repeatedly asked as he hosted Turkey's president.
Mr. President, no comment on whether you shared classified intelligence with the Russians?
The White House downplaying the Washington Post report that Trump told Russia's foreign minister and ambassador highly classified intelligence about an ISIS plot in Syria. Trump, who tweeted that it was his absolute right to share facts pertaining to terrorism, finally offering this an on-camera response.
Well, we had a very, very successful meeting with the foreign minister of Russia, and we want to get as many to help fight terrorism as possible.
The president's national security advisor says he did not jeopardize national security or hurt intelligence relationships with allies. The New York Times now reporting the sensitive intelligence came from Israel.
It's wholly appropriate for the president to share whatever information he thinks is necessary to advance the security of the American people.
Mixed reaction from Republicans.
I'm going to wait until I get a secured briefing on it before I make any statements.
GOP Senator John McCain called the reports deeply disturbing. Democrats demanding to see a transcript of the meeting.
If it was unwitting, that would be pathetic and dangerous. If it was intentional, that would even be, I don't know what's worse.
Now, for those defending President Trump, and the list seems to be getting smaller, whether on the leak of the classified information to the Russians or his seemingly bizarre worldview of Moscow, which seems based on the notion that somehow, some way, we can make them our friends and allies. And I believe that's a very generous interpretation of where his head's at on this. I'll save you the suspense. They're not our friends. Russia has acted like a provocative actor on the world stage, pushing time and time again to oppose American interests around the globe. And if you're wondering what I mean, well, Andrew had the unenviable task today of reviewing just where we are as it relates to Washington and Moscow and whether or not they are friend or foe. Andrew Whitman.
At least it wasn't the whole day on James Comey. Well, a little bit on James Comey, Rich. Many Americans thought that Russia was or might become a U.S. ally after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. And while the U.S. certainly provided some assistance in the early 90s, even Vladimir Putin, who in the 90s was the head of the FSB, that's the revamped KGB, he was not viewing the U.S. as an ally. His take was that the U.S., quote, loves us when we are impoverished, poor, and when we come hat in hand. And his actions as Russian president speak even louder. Of course, there is the election hacking or influencing here in the U.S. That's a fact confirmed by American intelligence, from fake news postings to the WikiLeaks dumps to more. Also a fact, there were contacts between people connected with the Russian government and the Trump campaign. The remaining question, was there collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign? But our elections in November weren't the only Western election that Moscow hacked or influenced. Their fingerprints are also on leaks and other government involvements in the recent French presidential election, the upcoming elections in Germany, and last year's Brexit vote in the UK. Then we get to Syria, where the Trump administration is hoping Moscow will help with ISIS. Problem is, the Russians support Assad in Syria. We do not. Russia has also shielded Assad after he used chemical weapons on his own people and has built a crematorium where the Syrians are killing political and military enemies. Russia also accused at worst of aiding and abetting the chemical weapons attacks, and at best of just claiming ignorance that Assad possessed them and used them. Let's not forget Ukraine, where the Russians invaded then annexed Crimea. Moscow has also been running a thinly veiled proxy war against the Ukrainian government, with Russian soldiers involved in the fighting in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine, not even the only European nation Russia is threatening. Moscow has placed nuclear-capable missiles near Lithuania and Poland, threatening not just those nations, but also NATO, and by extension, the United States, a founding member of NATO. Another direct threat to the U.S., Moscow's pursuit of a new nuclear arms race. They've been adding to and updating their nuclear arsenal. The Trump administration's response has been to add a massive nuclear arms increase of our own to the White House budget. The Russians have also broken treaties on plutonium disposal, on nuclear research, and has placed missiles near the Czech Republic, which is also a NATO member. If Russia were almost any other nation, their internal actions against their own people would have many Americans calling for action. There's been a huge uptick in recent years of Putin's critics ending up in prisons or gulags or dead. And both Russia and Chechnya, which the Russians essentially control, have well-documented policies of discriminating against, abusing, and trying to convert their LGBTQ populations, often in exceedingly cruel fashion. Finally, there are Russia's worrisome alliances, some more formalized than others. That list includes North Korea, Iran, Iraq, which despite the U.S.-propped government in Baghdad, Russia has been trying and by some accounts succeeding in increasing its influence. Also Hezbollah and Hamas, the Palestinian terror groups bent on the destruction of Israel. So this would-be ally in Moscow seems to play fast and loose with a lot of nations and groups that the United States considers enemies or even threats. Rich?
All right, Andrew, I think we can pretty comfortably say Russia, not a friend. Okay, let's bring in the panel right now. Four very good guys here to get into a whole bunch of things. And again, we're bringing you into our conversation as well. You see the toll-free number there. I'll get to those calls shortly. Scott Vanderhaas, a former 5-term Republican Rockland County exec. He's also co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist. You're having a good time tonight. And former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. And Andrew Whitman, you met already, our senior political correspondent. Okay. The day started in bizarre fashion with what we learned yesterday. The president made it worse this morning because he directly contradicted General McMaster's when he went out there and said, yes, I share the information with the Russians. Why not, in effect, here? Great ideas. I'm terrific. I'm fantastic. Big words. He's got great words or whatever. We now learn from the FBI, or the former FBI director, who took notes in the immediate aftermath and showed people notes, by the way, at the time, that President Trump asked him to, I hope you can let this go, talking about the investigation into Michael Flynn. He was so put off by it, he immediately took notes and shared it with reportedly 2 other people who saw this at the FBI. I've got a couple of attorneys at the table here. I'm not one, I'll play one on TV, but obstruction, it sure sounds like it, sure looks like it, and it sure feels like it, Scott.
Well, let's unravel a little bit. The last piece you talked about is far more serious in many respects than anything prior. Let me just put that on the side for a second because it comes close to obstruction. The issue as to the Russian and the information, I am not a Trump fan, as you well know, but the rush to judgment by some of the cable news and Washington Post before the facts came out is near hysteria.
Oh, but if I can just speak to that one point and then I'll let you go on. Just for folks who didn't follow the TikTok of it, Andrew laid it out. There was a meeting that the White House chose not to even let the press corps know who he was meeting. Again, so everybody remembers, the day after Comey was terminated for ostensibly not dropping the Russian investigation and asking for more resources on this. He's canned. The next day, he brings in some of the same Russian folks, including the alleged biggest spy master that they have, closes it out to the American press. Unbeknownst to them, a task photographer, which is a propaganda, shoots the photos we have there on our screen and then puts it out. We all thought that was bad enough. But then, and let's be clear, somebody in the room, because neither the CIA or the NSA were there in the room, somebody in the room was so put off by what was said by the president, they went to both the CIA and the NSA. This is NSA. This is somebody from the administration. And they made sure, and they begged the Washington Post, do not go with the details of it, of which the Washington Post obliged. So it's not like the Washington Post went willy-nilly on this. Our own intelligence agencies were alerted to something that someone from the administration found extremely problematic.
Yeah, but since then we've learned that this may have come from Israel. It has to do with ISIS and has to do with the laptop computers, which we all talked about weeks ago. This was not necessarily big news. Even McMaster says this wasn't specifically a typical coded information that the Trump had. It came from somebody else. Let me just finish this, though. Let me finish.
Okay.
But seeing Washington Post jumping up and down and all excited before they had the information, and the optics, Richard, aren't good. I grant you that. But we've reached a hysterical point of view. Second point, and I'll stop. The second point, the far more serious, apparently, in my opinion, is the issue of trying to have a president stop an investigation the day after, Flynn was fired. That is a serious, I think, impeachable type offense if it can be proven that it occurred.
Brief pushback on Scott's first point. Nobody is claiming that Trump said to the Russians, hey, the guy who gave us the information is Dominic Carter. He was in Jordan. We got it in. But they gave him enough information that they can put the pieces together. And that puts the sourcing at risk going forward. That also puts the alliance with whether it was Israel or somebody else in jeopardy.
Just so we're
clear
on one thing, Mossad, who I know all you guys know, that's the intelligence agency, the equivalent of the CIA for Israel. The former head of Mossad said, we will think twice now before sharing intelligence again with the United States. And also there's documentation going back that our own CIA agents on the ground in January told their counterparts in Israel, be careful what you share with this administration here, because they believed that that the administration was compromised by Russia. So again, this is not a news story that's coming out. We'll see the details that come out. General McMaster, who I respect, he did push back on the story. He said he was in the room. But I'm only saying the Washington Post wasn't in the room. CIA wasn't in the room and NSA wasn't. They were alerted because somebody in the room was that concerned by what he said.
Well, look, security is an issue for all of us, okay? For Russia, look, Saudi Arabia works with Israel on security issues of ISIS. They're not going to admit that publicly, but they do, because security is a huge concern. Look, it wasn't President Trump that leaked this information. He should be allowed. He didn't do anything wrong here. There was somebody else.
Richard.
Somebody else was in the room. They did something wrong. They leaked that stuff out to the press.
Wait a minute.
They should be prosecuted for it.
Russia is not our ally.
Russia is our ally in Syria.
You just hear what I said? Mossad has said they're going to think twice. No. First of all,
fighting ISIS,
we have different agendas in Syria.
But ISIS we're on the same page with Russia in terms of ISIS.
Okay, can I ask you a basic question? As a Republican tonight, are you closer to finally saying, more than being embarrassed by this administration, that you're not comfortable standing and defending them anymore?
Well, look, I agree with Scott. I'm deeply, and Senator McCain, I'm deeply concerned about whether you try to influence the FBI director to stop an investigation.
Even before that, I agree with you. Even before that, have there actions?
There is a communication issue that the White House does have, and we've seen it.
How about a trust issue, Richard?
Well, for the American people or the press?
What would you be saying if it was President?
No, you personally. Here's what's going to happen. I'll tell you right now, Dominic. Comey's going to have to testify. It's going to happen. So at some point, Comey's going to say, these are my notes. White House is going to say he's going to lie.
Right.
Who do you think you're going to trust more?
It's not a matter of trust. The notes are irrelevant. It's about what you can prove. Now, politically, we already know Trump's going to say it didn't happen. Comey, who conveniently dropped this, why didn't you reveal this before? You dropped this after
because he had an ongoing investigation.
No, he dropped it after he was terminated. But Richard, I agree with you on politics. On politics, this is a black eye for this president, and it's like, how many more? It's nonstop breaking news all day regarding the president of the United States. It's like forget an agenda. Can we go one day without this president making severe mistakes, revealing private, confidential information? It's not whether or not who leaked it. This is the president. Imagine if Obama did 1% of what Trump has done. Just imagine.
I was just about to ask Scott and Richard, let's say it wasn't Trump leaking information to the Russians. Let's say it was President Hillary who decided spontaneously in the Oval Office to share classified information. Are you really telling me that the response would be different?
The president has the ability to declassify
It was classified until the moment he decided to go boasting about how good his intel
more than that,
and he was talking to a high-level Russian official about it. Which, if it was just them in a room, we would never be talking about this.
Honestly, if this report came out about President Hillary, you'd really be singing the same song.
No, you know that.
There will be talk of impeachment right away.
But that's politics on it. Whether right or wrong is different.
Before we go to break.
Yeah, one of the most disturbing things about all of this is the complete messed up messages from the White House, from the president. And the reason I say that is we can't get a clear story from any of them. We don't know who to trust. And I'm really serious. In a major emergency, a national emergency, I have no idea how we as citizens would trust any of it.
I'll say right now, God forbid there was an international incident, and the president said that he had compelling evidence and he needed to take direct military action. If there was a person skeptical about the agenda and the motives of the president, they would not be a conspiracy theorist. I think it's legit. I think it's to that point. So for a while now, well, really, for the last 116 days or whatever it's been, we've talked nonstop, as Dominic said, after scandal, day after day after day, after lies that have been proven, after falsehoods, after mixed messaging, after scandal. I want to know from you at home. Some say, oh, this is the media with an agenda. Other people said they've had it. Where do you fall right now as it relates to this administration? Toll-free numbers right there at the bottom of your screen. When I come back, I'm going to take your phone calls and the guys will weigh in. The latest controversies, plural, about Russia, both this morning and this afternoon. The firing of James Comey or anything else relating to Donald Trump. You got a lot to pick from here. We'll be right back with your reaction straight ahead.